Hello, a very warm welcome to this NDI webinar. My name is Renato. I'm the host and producer at NDI.tv, and I'll be your host for the next 40 to 50 minutes. Today's topic is getting your NDI workflows ready with Panasonic and NETGEAR. And joining us today is our very own NDI guru, Roberto Musso, a certification project manager from NDI. He'll be talking us through what's new in the latest NDI 5.5 update. And then we'll be hearing from Mads Bolding, a sales engineer and PTZ specialist with Panasonic. He'll be talking about the Panasonic PTZ ecosystem. Following Mads, we'll hear from Richard Jonker, Vice President of Business Development from NETGEAR, and he'll be talking about how to deploy NDI in the best and easiest possible way with NETGEAR, of course. Finally, we'll have a Q&A session where you'll be able to ask all your questions to any of our three panelists. Just type them into the chat below into the presentation, and as we'll do our best to answer them as many as we can in the time that we have available. So let's get started with Roberto. Prego.
Hey, thank you. And I'm very pleased to be here. It's very exciting. We've been working with NETGEAR and Panasonic for many years, and it's a real pleasure. So let me show you what we have done with NDI 5 and then with NDI 5.5 in the last 2 years. Yes, I mean, NDI is the unstoppable stream toward the future, and because for us, NDI is our video over IP and audio over IP technology. So in 2021, we released NDI 5. And with the 5 version of NDI tools, we introduced new technology and new tools. One of the main important feature, I would say, is reliable UDP. Reliable UDP is a technology that is helping user to simplify the network. I mean, the NDI usage and the network infrastructure. This has been probably the biggest step forward for NDI. Then we made a lot of improvement. For example, improvement in Discovery Server. We enable network interface selection and some more tools. For example, we introduced NDI Audio Direct, which is an NDI VST3 plugin that enable audio workflow with NDI. And then we introduce NDI Bridge. NDI Bridge is a fantastic tool that allow user to share over internet, over a wider network, multiple NDI source. Is bidirectional, support every NDI capability. For example, it support multi-channel audio, bidirectional metadata, PTZ control, KBM. Is a very important tool. And then we introduce NDI Remote, which is a very simple way to share your video over internet. In 2022, we introduced NDI 5.5 with new feature and new tools. One important tool is the NDI router. Is basically simulating an SDI workflow. So every user now can create a complex routing just using a single application. With NDI router, I don't need anymore to, for example, to select and receive and decide to receive a source on the receiver side, but I can have this application in the middle that manage basically the cross point of NDI signal. And then we introduce NDI Remote 2 with the tollback function and screen capture. And this is very important. I mean, this is a very big update in NDI webcam, where we can use now up to 4 simultaneous sources. And we add a very important feature in NDI Audio Direct, where now it's possible to configure audio level both as a source or as an output. Another very important feature that is probably, I mean, not really visible, but is really important. So you can define which kind of application part of the NDI tools will be launched on system startup. For example, this is very important for cloud deployment, because I mean, every time I run a cloud machine, I can set up the auto start of webcam screen capture with KVM, NDI Bridge, or Studio Monitor, or the NDI router. Then we introduce a new plugin for Unreal Engine with cross-platform support and support for Unreal Engine 5. And this is very important, a new end-user registration. Why is important? Because with this new registration, we allow third party to pre-install NDI tools in a computer. And this is, again, has been a big request for cloud deployment. So a third-party organization can pre-install NDI tools, and then the end user perform the registration. This is another interesting tool that is part of the SDK, NDI Free Audio. NDI Free Audio is a very small application that exists for many different platforms, for Windows, for Linux. So with NDI Free Audio, you can use any kind of computer, for example, a Raspberry Pi. If you connect an audio sound card to a Raspberry Pi, then you can run this application and make this small computer as a NDI Audio I/O. And we enable SDK improvement. For example, with the advanced SDK, we allow to specify NDI quality. We improve MDNS and discovery support, and we add FPGA decoding with the advanced SDK. I think is all for now. And as you can see, we are actively working, improving NDI. More new feature will come, more new improvement will come, and we'll keep you updated on that. Thank you.
Excellent stuff. Thank you very much for that, Roberto. So now we'll be moving to our presentations from Mads and Richard. So take it away.
Hello everyone, my name is Mads and I'm the Sales Engineer, Project Manager and PTZ Specialist with Panasonic Europe. So today I'm going to talk about the Panasonic PTZ ecosystem. We already sold over 200,000 units globally, so we tend to call ourselves the PTZ architect. We do that because we have a wide range of protocols and integration, robotics, free software, auto tracking and automation, outdoor solutions and accessories, paint panels, control panels and 4K switches. On our website, you don't just have a list of products, you can actually go on a safari yourself to explore our products. It's a great way of seeing new things that you haven't seen before and see what is needed in a studio to make everything work. And I also think it's a very fun way to go on exploring yourself to see what is going on and maybe come across new products that you haven't even thought about. So please go and have a look for yourself because it's very nice. Let's have a look at the current PTZ lineup from Panasonic. So we have entry models ranging all the way up to specialist models. And of course, as you see, NDI and NDI HX is of course supported in most of our models. We lately introduced a new camera called the UE160, and that is the one I want to talk about today. So let's have a look at some of the features. So we have a wide-angle lens with 20 times zoom. We have a brand new sensor with extremely high sensitivity. We have a new focus system, which is a combination of phase detection autofocus and contrast autofocus. We have a moire reduction filter for LED wall shooting, and we are the first PTZ ever to support SMPTE 2110. We have full bandwidth NDI in 4K 60p, of course. And then we have support for a 5G USB dongle for remote production. We are also the first camera to support 120 frames of high-speed output in 1080p. Then we have a waveform monitor, a level gauge to support you for doing setup. So let's have a look at some of the features here. So the high image quality to capture subjects even in the dark is very important, and now you can use this camera for doing video in theaters, musical concerts, and even in conferences when zooming in a lot and you need a lot of light. This new sensor performs absolutely fantastic. The new autofocus system is a combination of phase detection autofocus and contrast autofocus to provide fast, accurate and less confused autofocus. So instead of going back and forth to find the right point, it knows the distance and goes to that point immediately. And the user interface also displays the direction of the focus when in manual mode, so it's easier to use. If the 20 times zoom is not enough, you can also use the cropping function. So here in this instance, we have a situation with this interview where we have a total and then we have some crop frames framing in the two persons speaking to each other. In the camera, you can then select what to output from the camera's output. And then you suddenly have 3 cameras in one. To sum it up, some of the other features, we have a high-speed output, we have the built-in optical low-pass filter, we have image stabilization, we have a horizontal level gauge display. Scene files can be copied from one camera to the other, so you have the same settings on all the cameras. And of course, as I said, we have the waveform display. We also feature large tally lamps, both front and rear, so it's easy to see what's going on in the studio. If you're working with SMPTE 2110, you also have the possibility of sending a return video feed. So the footage is sent back from the switcher to the camera so that the cast can check the final footage. In this situation here, this weathercast man looking at the screen for seeing what he's doing on the green screen. During COVID, we had to explore new ways of showing our camera products when we couldn't travel around and shipping them around to the customers. So we decided to build a virtual demo room. We hung up all the cameras. We built a little studio with a table, a bar, some lights and jukebox, some bottles, and then suddenly we had a stage. So now you can go in and book a session. You can choose a camera to look at, and then you can go full screen to see what is going on in the picture. And you are able to choose between different presets to maneuver the camera. You're also able to zoom in, use the focus, the iris, the white balance, and you can even dim the lights in the room or change the lights temperature. You can also shut them off completely if you want to check out the sensitivity of the different cameras. And if you want to check out the different viewing angles of the different camera models, you can also do that, as well as checking out how far the zoom goes. So this is a very nice way to check out all the cameras in our lineup to see how they perform. So please have a look at that yourself. We can also do a guided tour where we will guide the customers through the various software that we have, the auto tracking system, and so on. So that was what I wanted to show with you today. So thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to hear all your questions. Thank you.
Hi, this is Richard with NETGEAR, and today we would like to talk about how to deploy NDI in the best and easiest possible way with NETGEAR. Welcome. We built AV over IP switches. Why did we do that? Because, well, AV is one planet and IT is the other planet. And people from AV don't speak IT language and the other way around. While people in the AV world talk about protocols like NDI, people on the IT side talk about IP addresses and multicast and Ethernet cables and IGMP. And to use AV over IP on an IT switch, well, it requires that you know a little bit of both worlds, and that's what we're trying to do. So we've built products for the AV over IP deployments using IT knowledge in the back, but applying learnings from the AV world so that AV people can use these switches and deploy them without having to understand all the IT speak, just by using AV technology learnings. And I'll show you how that works. We've worked with over 180 manufacturers in the AV over IP space, including NewTek, NDI, and Panasonic, and others, to really fine-tune our products to work with the applications in broadcast or commercial AV where NDI is often used. For that, we have completely changed the look and feel of our switches because, well, IT switches, you know them. They sit in a data center, they're loud, they work as a blow dryer for your hair as well as a patch system for all kind of cables, right? That's how it looks. They don't have the look and feel usually of a nice AV deployment. So here we did it differently with the AV line M42 line of switches. We put the connectors at the back, but indicators, LEDs on the front. So while your cables are neatly hidden behind the rack, you still have your indicators in front of you. So that nicely integrates with an AV setup, whether that's commercial or residential or in broadcast. We have a wide range of products. In the M4250 series alone are now 13 different switches, all the way from 8 ports PoE, 125 watts, up to a 2U high rack product for 32 times 90 watts PoE++. You can pick those products either with 1 gig uplink or 10 gig uplinks, depending on the need and the amount of endpoints in your network. This all results then in a clean integration, depending on the size. This could be as small as a desktop, let's say 25 centimeters wide set of products, or a full rack with equipment for thousands of endpoints. We can do it all. So with NDI, there's something specific. NDI is a network device interface and basically helps you to transport audio and video coming from a source to a destination over the network. Underlying are a lot of concepts that you shouldn't be dealing with. We should solve that for you. And we've done that. This is the result of a test with Roberto with NewTek last year, where we compared running NDI 4 and NDI 5 over a network in one VLAN, and then we found out when does it work well, when doesn't it work well. And we continue to do these tests to make sure that our switches are preset for the right flavors, which means if you go to NDI 5, you would pick the NDI 5 protocol in the switch, and all settings are good, including things like flow control and jumbo frames and all those things you don't want to deal with. We handle this, and we continually test it with multiple manufacturers, including Panasonic, to make sure that our network switch works as the best possible NDI solution. We have a lot of training material online, how to configure, for example, NDI 5 on our switches. Here's my colleague, John Henkel from San Jose, California, talking you through the interface of the M4250 switch and helping you to deploy NDI in the best possible way. And maybe you just don't want to handle NDI. You may want to handle an audio source as well. For example, Dante. Or you want to have NDI, but you want to break out Dante and do something else with it. Dante is an audio protocol that deserves to be treated in its own way and doesn't always play nice with other protocols. So NETGEAR helps you put Dante on a separate VLAN, for example, and make sure that the traffic flows there where it has to go. Not only do we have training videos, we have our own Pro AV design team that is always available for a personal consultation. And this can be a pre-sales meeting where you just want to talk about how you want to deploy NDI, and they can advise you on how to set it up, or you want help with the setup, sorry, or you want to talk about an upgrade of an existing deployment. We are here to help. Another course we do, actually our most famous one, is Top 10 Tips for AV over IP Network Design. It's the result of all the consultations we had for tens of thousands of AV over IP networks, and the 10 most important pitfalls that you have when designing such a network. Let me talk you through. Most important is pick AV over IP capable switches that are able to do multicast, that are able to do the things you want from an AV over IP network, which means you separate audio, video, control, and data, which means a managed switch, also one that is capable of handling the specific needs of NDI, if you do this in multicast, for example, and also the speed it needs to have in terms of compute, as well as the connection speed with other switches. Get trained on network design, find out what the requirements are, which is counting the inputs, the outputs, the sources and the targets, and then do the math on the total required networking speeds. Organize your audio, video, and VLANs. Remember, ports are full duplex. That means 1 gigabit in and 1 gigabit out can happen at the same time. It's not like HDMI where you pick one and then the other. An Ethernet port can do both at the same time. Quality of service was a thing 15 years ago, not really something to worry about. We handle that easily now with our modern silicon. Design for scale, not for today, but also for tomorrow. Create a dedicated AV network. Don't mix AV over IP with data and control that ends in tears. You don't have to buy extra switches. Just make sure that the AV is handled only by switches done for AV. And finally, use quality transceivers so it doesn't break when you go from a switch to a fiber cable and use an inferior module. Most important tip, however, is to consult us before you start at proavdesign@netgear.com. We're here to help 24/7. With that said, more information you can find on netgear.com/proav. Thank you very much. We will help you when you deploy NDI, and we'll make it easy for you. Thank you.
Excellent stuff. Thank you so much for your presentation, guys. Excellent. Now it's time for your questions. Please remember to type them into the chat box below, addressing them to either Roberto, Mads, or Richard. And we also have Nori Yonizawa, PTZ Product Manager from Panasonic Global HQ, and Masashi Sawata, Network Engineer for Panasonic, who implemented the NDI technology into Panasonic PTZ cameras, joining us for this Q&A session from the Panasonic Global HQ in Japan. So thank you very much, gentlemen. Nori and Sawata, I have a first question for you. What would be the advantage of using NDI HX out of the Panasonic PTZ cameras instead of other vendors' cameras, please?
Okay, let me answer that question first. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yep, thanks for that question. So, we know that there are so many PTZ vendors who support NDI and NDI HX. And one of the key advantages of Panasonic being able to output NDI, especially HX, is we think that we developed its own Panasonic's own encoder to output IP streaming, which is utilized for streaming NDI HX, and that's why we have you can do more fine-tuned setting, such as bitrate setting and so on. As for the bitrate setting, you can set the bitrate in a very fine way from 1 megabps to 20 mbps. So I think it's one of the key advantages of using Panasonic PTZ cameras.
Excellent, thank you so much. And when would you choose the UE 160 over the UE 150 camera, and why?
Yeah, let me try to answer that. So basically, the UE 160, as we saw, features a brand new set of competences. So, for instance, if you're doing a shooting in the theater or musical concert or even a conference where you need to use the zoom a lot, normally you would decrease the lighting going into the camera by doing so. So you would need the camera to be more light sensitive. So the UE 160 with the brand new sensor makes it possible to get more light in. So for instance, when you're used to gain up in the camera and you will add more noise, you'll see that the level of noise in the UE 160 is very low compared to the amount of light that are going into the sensor. So that is one of the reasons. One of the other reasons is also because of the new focus system. So for instance, when you're doing a conference where you're following a person up stage, or you have a certain arrangement where persons will be walking and there will be a lot of movement, the contrast autofocus system is not that great for doing that, because it could easily be fixed on the background. So for instance, if you have a LED wall in the background where there's a lot of contrast in, the focus would go back and forth to try to steal the attention. But with the UE 160's new focus system using phase autofocus, and also in combination with the contrast autofocus, will be a lot easier to see the talent instead and then focus on that. And as well as the new optical low pass filter, where you will actually reduce the amount of moire quite significantly. So you will definitely also see a difference in using the 160 over the UE 100 in those situations. And that is just basically some of the features there. One other feature that I just came across in Italy and in Germany on my most recent trips are that we tested out the UE 160 on robotic solutions, like dollies and totems and stuff like that. So the whole core structure of the UE 160 is very stable and it's very rigid. So that means if you're moving the camera a lot on a dolly, for instance, you'll have a very stable construction of the UE 160.
Excellent, thank you very much for that answer, Matt. Masashi, I think I have a question for you here. When would I use NDI HX and NDI full bandwidth instead of SDI or HDMI?
Yeah, I guess NDI and NDI HX advantage is one cable solution compared with the SDI and HDMI. It means the NDI customer implements the many environment. For example, they cannot physically power supply, and they can more long distance video delivery. So I think so. Most advantage is that the customer they can implement the more easy to video workflows. So I think so.
Okay, thank you so much.
And I might also just add that when doing installations in new type of customers, when like for instance a hotel or a place where you don't have the necessary broadcast infrastructure, you're most likely to find a cable solution for Ethernet, connecting all the networks together in a hotel, for instance. And thereby it would be easier just to hang up the camera, plug in the cable, and then you're on, instead of drawing new cables around the building, making it a lot more expensive to implement cameras.
Great, thank you very much for those answers. Richard, when do I need to use AV over IP capable switches instead of the standard ones?
Yeah, you could say that if you do one NDI camera, then all that you need would be a small PoE switch. PoE meaning the power goes over that one cable that we just talked about. But if you have multiple switches with cameras maybe in different sites and a larger network where some of the NDI streams have to go to multiple receivers, you have to use a protocol called multicast, which kind of arranges the traffic. And you can compare this to a large square in the middle of a big city. If there is nothing to arrange all that traffic, and traffic comes from 7 different roads onto that central square, it's going to be messy. Now that protocol to arrange that underlying protocol is called IGMP. If you don't use a switch that has a proper implementation of that, you get choppy video. And we get a lot of questions from video people, not IT people, that say, I have choppy video. An IT person doesn't say that, right? They say, well, there's something wrong with IGMP v3, the query snooping. But video people don't talk like that. The picture is either good or it's not good. So when we get confronted with a question like that, we go in and we check what kind of switch did you use? How did you set it up? We check the traffic going in and out. Is it being handled correctly? Is there a traffic cop on the network? This IGMP thing. And that's when we find, hey, your setup is correct. The only thing missing is actually a switch that can handle the traffic well. And that's when we advise use an AV over IP switch, which also made it to the #1 tip of our top 10, because it really solves most of the problems, as Roberto and I have found last year when we started playing around with this. We have a Facebook group for NDI enthusiasts. Maybe you've seen it, NDI video users on Facebook, yeah. 36,000 members. It's the #1 question on that Facebook group is stuff like this. It's fun to be able to address it here on this webinar, actually. Thank you.
That's great to hear. Another question for you, Richard, is can I run NDI4 and NDI5 and Dante on the same network? And if so, how?
Yeah, what you're basically trying to do is run 3 Ferraris through a small street. And if everyone can drive really well, that's no problem. But we all know, right? So we try to separate it in 3 lanes. All these protocols are fantastic by themselves. Now, NDI4 is multi-TCP, as Roberto already commented. NDI5 is based on reliable UDP. That's a little different. And Dante, well, Dante is Dante. And Dante doesn't play well with NDI4 on the same VLAN, so we strongly recommend to separate that. There are people that are able to configure NDI4 and Dante on the same VLAN. Those people can also fly and land a space shuttle. The other 7.5 billion people in the world cannot do that, and they use a NETGEAR switch and just, separated in traffic lanes.
Great, thank you so much. I have a question for you, Roberto. Does NDI for Unreal finally support Mac OS?
Okay, so we improving the Mac OS support is in our plan. That's it.
I like the plan.
And by the way, can I add something about Dante and NDI? Yeah, myself and NETGEAR guys, we did a lot of tests. Let me tell you that with NDI 5 is much easier to make NDI and Dante coexisting in the same network. I do it usually daily. And of course, you need to understand that, as Richard mentioned, Dante doesn't like, other Ferrari running in the same highway, but, reliable UDP helps a lot.
Right, okay. I have another question for you here, Roberto, while I have you. Any experience with NDI Bridge in an enterprise? I think that means, do you need any experience with NDI Bridge as an enterprise?
So we have some customer using NDI Bridge to avoid multicast, and this is one of the typical usage in enterprise. For example, I need to share the same source with 100 or I don't know, many monitor, but I don't want to use multicast because it's too complex to set up. And this is one of the typical usage of NDI bridge. And yeah, we have customers doing that. The other usage is again sharing multiple NDI source over LAN, reducing the bandwidth. For example, I have several sources inside Studio One, and I want to share all those sources in Studio 2, but I don't want to use NDI full bandwidth. And so this is where NDI bridge help, because can transcode all the NDI high bandwidth source to NDI HX with different bitrate. And this is another typical usage in this environment.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I have a question for the guys at Panasonic. I'm not sure if you can actually answer this, but what someone has said, we are developing NDI AV production integrated in private 5G network, into a private 5G network. Is Panasonic planning to offer NDI HX in the Kairos? Can anyone answer that?
I can tackle the 5G part. That's a product we have. So,
okay.
So we say it's from NETGEAR's perspective, it's possible to use our AV over IP switches with an uplink to our 5G modems, and we have models going up to several gigabit per second. And you can even do that if you add a redundant router, and there are manufacturers that are specialized in bonding multiple 5G connections. There is no technical reason why this shouldn't work, right? So I think this really comes down to having the right software and then choosing, for example, what Roberto discussed with NDI Bridge, the right way of getting it over the 5G network, right? What you should not be doing is using uncompressed streams, full NDI 4K 60, and then try to squeeze 10 of them through let's say a moderate 5G connection. That's probably not going to go well. So this all has to do with how you calculate the total bandwidth. There's a latency consideration as well, because 5G adds a little latency, but NDI can deal really well with latency, right? It's built in the protocol to deal with that. So from a network perspective, you're good.
Right, thank you, Richard. That was a network question.
Just to add a note, this is one of the reasons why we develop NDI bridge, because there are, especially wireless or 5G, sometimes there is a lot of jittering, and NDI bridge helps a lot because there is a error correction method that is stronger than usual NDI, because NDI has been defined to be very low latency, and so in some condition it's much better to use NDI bridge.
Okay, thank you very much. Someone also said that you mentioned you consider Dante an audio protocol. Since a while, Dante also supports video distribution, Dante AV. Are the NETGEAR switches prepared for this? Some question for Roberto or Richard, please.
Yeah, I'll take the Dante AV question. So Dante AV is a combination of Dante audio using the same network framework, and it adds video to that. There's actually two versions. There's Dante AV, and now they have AVH, which uses H.264, H.265. You can use the same network, but if you would say, for example, you're building a home, can I connect 10 bathtubs and 10 showers to the same water pipe? Well, you can, but the water will be dripping, right? This will not be a full rain shower experience. It's the same with the Dante network. Yes, it works with 1 gigabit ports, but you cannot keep on expanding because the total bandwidth in the end, you know, it has to come together somewhere, may not be enough. So the advice is just like with a proper NDI network, you have to do the math, right? It's one of the tips from our top 10. Add up how many of these connections need to traverse from the switch somewhere else, and then you can get this to work. If you use an NDI network and you also use Dante AV, there's no reason this shouldn't be working if you keep those tips and you make sure your bandwidth is considered.
Excellent, thank you very much. And this is a question for the guys at Panasonic. Will the Panasonic UA150 support NDI 4K output in the future?
Sorry, what was the model number again?
The UE150. It's the question was, will Panasonic UE150 support 4K NDI output in the future update?
That's a good question. Let me just double check with the engineer, and I may have to, talk in Japanese. So 澤田さん、UE150 の 4K、はい、これは将来難しい。160でっていう感じですかね。
Yeah, AW150 it's have a hardware limitation of the hardware encoder, so it is so difficult to support up to NDI 4K output. But so we implement the NDI 4K output to AWE160, so it is different of the AWE150 and the AWE160.
Yeah, so if you're looking at 4K out of NDI, I would recommend that you go for UE160.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Thank you so much. And what are your plans about integrating NDI or SMPTE 2110 into your professional projector setups? Having the complete AV workflow and network base would be very interesting. Can you reveal?
This is also something that has been a lot of testing on, and we're ready to do. We have, I had the pleasure of being on tour with the visual guys for the last 2 months, learning a lot about projectors and screens and stuff. So that was very nice. And as they have these SDM slots in the projectors and the displays, they are able to implement almost anything made out there. So there's a lot of different vendors out there making different SDM boards for these products. So virtually anything would be possible in these products in the future, and some of them already supported, of course.
Excellent. I have another question about the UE160. The Panasonic camera UE160 monitor output signal for the talent to view is received on the camera also via NDI. Can anyone answer that?
Sorry.
Yeah, that.
I can rephrase the question. Is the Panasonic camera UE160 monitor output signal for the talent to view received on the camera also via NDI? That's the correct phrasing of the question.
Yeah, currently we planning. Okay.
Go ahead.
Currently we planning to monitor output is only ST2110, but technically it is possible to support NDI, but currently not supported yet.
Okay.
Yes, it's only through ST2110 at this moment. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Someone is asking us, is the AWE160 already available for purchase?
No, unfortunately not yet. It will be in the end of February next year. So currently now we are working on the camera and testing it out, see all the different features, showing it around when we get around. So we can't wait to show this to everybody in late February next year.
Hey, Mats, when did we show it at ISE, end of January, if you have it available?
Yes. Yeah.
We'll hook it up with a switch, with one of your projectors, maybe with an Intel SDM board, transcoding NDI straight into the projector. We can actually do that. That'd be a nice thing to show to everyone.
Yeah, definitely. We will show that. Yeah.
Roberto, I have a question for you. Is there a plan in place to have an application like NDI Studio Monitor available on mobiles?
I don't think is in our plan because we are much more focused to have third party doing something like that. So NDI tools are mainly for computer, and but there is a lot of, I mean, there are a lot of third-party developers that are developing now or on mobile platforms. So I believe this is happening soon.
Thank you very much. Richard, how do you recommend separating networks, AV versus control or other data, when a machine has limited ports?
Yeah, if the port on your computer is VLAN aware, depending on your implementation, you could use one port and place it in multiple VLANs. That is possible. If you don't want to do that and you have one port, well, you have to solve it in a different way. For example, by configuring a trunk port on the switch that would directly talk to your computer. A common scenario is you use NDI, for example, OBS Studio on your computer to manipulate some of these things, right? In a very small setup. I think most of us here have played with that. If you take it one step up, you would configure a vMix server, for example, and then you would typically do that. So we often talk, very often talk to customers that are trying to configure that. The answer is trunk port. The best solution is, if you really want to do this as powerful as possible, is 2 NIC cards in the computer. If you can't do that, it still would work. If you do 2 NIC cards, it's possible to place the computer then simultaneously in 2 different VLANs, which is on one hand okay, because it's easier to configure. On the other hand, your IT manager may not like that, because you're creating a bridge on your computer and you may not deal with all the security in the right way. So the securest way of doing it is get that, well, also cheaper computer connected to a trunk port on the switch, and we can help you configure that. So if you are frustrated because it doesn't work, email us at proavdesign@netgear.com and we'll just do it for you.
Excellent. Okay. Question for you, Roberto. Is there already a possibility, i.e. hardware, to add Dante audio to NDI?
No, not by hardware, but there are, I mean, you can easily do it with NDI Audio Direct and an open source application like Ardour, for example. If you install in your computer an NDI Dante sound card, even the virtual sound card, and you run Ardour with the NDI audio plugin, NDI Audio Direct, then you can use Ardour as a NDI Dante gateway. Very easy.
Okay, thank you so much. I have a ton of questions here, especially for Panasonic. Everyone seems to want to know when the UE160 will be available. Can anyone tell me that?
Yeah, as we talked about before, late February. Yeah.
Okay. It was when someone's asking specifically in Australia. So. Okay. There's someone saying hello from the University of Thessaloniki in Greece. Thank you for your excellent info sharing here. As an AV systems and designer and engineer for higher education, I am very pleased with the Panasonic AW cameras and NDI technology in general. I wish other AV manufacturers like Extron may integrate NDI directly into AV matrices. So to combine technologies like DTP into one device instead of using NDI HDMI converters. That doesn't seem to be a question, but they seem to be very happy with us anyway. Okay. Can the 3D protocol from a PTZ being transmitted somehow in the open internet for remote augmented reality production? Okay, I can see. Can the 3D protocol from a PTZ being transmitted somehow be on the open internet for remote augmented reality production? Can anyone tackle that one?
I can take it. We are working on that. We are working to define 3D over NDI protocol. Okay,
thank you very much. A question for Panasonic: is it possible to output the NDI and SDI signal at the same time on all types of PTZ cameras?
Most of the cameras can, and basically also from the UE160, you can actually use all the outputs at the same time.
Okay, this is another short question. Do Panasonic PTZ cameras at present support both NDI 4 and 5?
Yes, is the short answer.
That's good. Short answers are good. Okay, let's have a look here. We have a lot of questions here. What is the maximum cable length for a cable run to a camera? I'm not sure what that one, if that one's pertinent or not.
Yeah, that's 100 meters, even if you use PoE. And that's part of the Ethernet specification. We've tested that, it just works. Don't buy the cheapest Ethernet cable on AliExpress, I would say, buy a decent one. And then if you're in live production using NDI, which is a fantastic application for NDI, make sure the visitors don't trip over the cable. That would be our tip. But 100 meters, no problem.
Okay, great. Another one for you, Richard. Well, have you using Wi-Fi and NDI isn't recommended, but does NETGEAR have any offerings for this?
Looking at it, so currently the limitation for Wi-Fi is that Wi-Fi changes any form of multicast into broadcast. It goes everywhere, so it gets very noisy. So what we've tested is take an NDI camera, use a Wi-Fi bridge to replace an Ethernet cable, obviously without the PoE option, right? You would need power still. And then you can bridge an NDI signal over Wi-Fi. I mean, it's more than fast enough. But doing a real NDI protocol deeply embedded in Wi-Fi, with the current technology, Wi-Fi 6 and 6E, don't think that will happen. But with the new Wi-Fi 7 specification, there are some possibilities. And we're having discussions, and this is really very low level with the chip manufacturers about how to do that. But don't expect anything for the next 2 years.
Okay, thank you. Roberto or Richard again, how does the NDI discovery server affect the network traffic? Does it avoid having to use multicast?
Yeah. Can you, Roberto, handle the MDNS, and then we'll talk a little bit about multicast after that?
Yeah, so natively NDI use MDNS. Is exactly, I mean, in our plan was to make NDI working very easily, exactly like when you want to print a document with your network printer. You discover your printer and you print a document. We did exactly the same with NDI. But there are situations where MDNS, for example, is not welcomed by the security people in your network. This is a typical example. Or maybe, I mean, you have 100 of NDI transmitter and receiver in the network and MDNS becomes low. So we developed this very small application, Discovery Server, and this application exists for almost any operative system, for Linux, Windows, Mac OS, I mean. And at this point, if you set up the Discovery Server in your NDI equipment, then they stop transmit MDNS and they are sending their information to the Discovery Server. And this is, I mean, there are different advantage using the Discovery Server. The discovery and registration is faster. You can have a Discovery Server working across different subnets. So one Discovery Server can be used to discover NDI source in different subnet. And you can use Discovery Server to avoid, for example, the combination between Discovery Server and NIC selection. With this technique, you avoid NDI, for example, to use the Dante network. And I hand over to you, Richard, about multicast.
Yeah, I think MDNS is a great way for easy discovery, and I fully agree with what Roberto said. I think it's one of the foundations for the huge success of NDI because it makes it easy. The same what Apple did when they used MDNS to build Bonjour, right? Which means any Apple device can find any Apple device like that. Now, we have a business case with a large high school here in the Netherlands, actually, that fully runs on Apple, where there was one network and all the Apple devices say every few seconds, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. It got very noisy. So they had to separate that, and then you enter what Roberto was describing. Well, then you need to work across VLANs because you separate classrooms on different VLANs, different protocols on different VLANs. Becomes very messy. Now, having Discovery Server, I think, is a great solution for that because Roberto says it works across VLANs. Now, when you do multicast, which means one device can send to multiple receiving devices, but not all of them, you typically do that on one VLAN. And that's the way we at NETGEAR handle this as a layer 2 protocol on the VLAN. We don't go over all the VLANs with this because well, it defies the purpose, right? Then it would get messy again and noisy. So when you design a network to do this, I think Roberto gave the perfect tip using Discovery Server if you have NDI devices over different VLANs. Our advice on top of that is if you don't have to, don't do this, right? It gets messy, it gets noisy. You need to start thinking about inter-VLAN routing, maybe PIM routing. You don't want that headache. That's only if you have a very large enterprise or a university campus, you would need to fall into that trap. Don't do this to yourself. It's very hurtful and painful, and there will be tears. So let us help you by doing it on one VLAN with NDI, multiple VLANs if necessary. Keep Dante away from it, and I think that will be the quickest way to success.
Okay, another networking question here, please, probably for Roberto. Will NDI be introducing test tools to see in real time how the system is performing?
I'm not sure I understood the question. Can you repeat? Yep.
Yes. Will NDI introduce test tools to see in real time how the system is performing?
Okay. So I think, so what we need to do, and this is again in the plan, we need to add some data on NDI transmitters, some metadata, to be able to then create a software application to, let's say, to verify possible issue on the network or the transmitter. We are working on that. But I think, again, we would like third party to develop those kind of application, because this is not really our part of expertise. I mean, we are doing NDI, and there are experts on networking or on analysis tool. And this is the reason why we are improving our SDK, to give the opportunity to third party to develop more tools around NDI. But we definitely want to do it.
Yeah, I think on the side, we can say the reason why people want this tool is, do they just want to stare at something that shows everything is good, right? A whole bunch of green dots. No. You want to use it when there's something wrong. And when there's something wrong, you can say, okay, we have a trouble with some NDI performance on a certain segment of the network. Well, then the next question is, just when you go to the doctor, you don't ask, how do I get this illness? No, how do I get rid of this illness? So very quickly, you need to go one level down. And that's where we come in. I think, and Roberto worded already perfectly, NDI takes care of the video, right? The underlying NETGEAR network should take care of the performance. So if there's something with that, don't call Roberto, call me, right? And we'll solve that issue. And then we have the tools built in our AV over IP switches, the M4250, which is really the best fit for NDI. There's actually a way you can export a file that shows you per port what's going in and what's going out. And with that, and we have done thousands and thousands of these analyses, we're very capable of immediately pinpointing what the problem is, right? It's usually an uplink port that is not performing, or a transceiver that's not doing well, or maybe a broken cable. It's usually small issues that are easy to solve once you know on the network level where the problem is. So don't blame Roberto. It's not his fault.
Okay, Roberto. Okay, a couple of PTZ specific questions now before we wrap up. Mads, with the UE160, when using moire reduction, is there a recommended minimum distance between the subject and an LED wall? Good question.
That's a very good question. You could say, or you could argue, that if you place the talent further away from the background, or the LED wall in this case, you could blur the background using the zoom and the focus to create this shallow depth of field. But another issue would then be, okay, I need to show the background in my broadcast because I have some graphics there, or I have an underlying video or something. So you can't get anything, everything in one. So you need to test out the best position of the camera in order to see how it reacts. Actually, I was in Finland a couple of weeks ago doing a test where they had this whole floor of LEDs. So actually showing very spread out LEDs with a video. And also we had a screen on the back showing videos as well. So I was placing the UE160 in different lengths from the scene to see where it would grab up the moire and show it. And I tested it against the UE150. So some of the results is that if you are in a certain position, you would see both round moires and square moires. But on the UE160, you would only see the square moires, meaning that you won't notice it that much because you're kind of just seeing the structure of the LED wall. So one could argue that you would just need to test out what you want to see. And if you are building a studio where the viewer is meant to see the background all the time, you would need to go with an LED wall where the pixels are much denser than if you're just using the wall to create some colors or some effect on the talent. So you really need to test it out to see the difference, because if you have seen a broadcast where they use an LED wall in the background, you can easily see the pixels. You can almost count them. So the question is, do you want to be able to count the pixels, or do you want it to be blurred out, or do you want to just see what's going on in the background and then choose the right LED screen for that instead of chasing another camera, basically?
Great answer. Thank you very much, Mads. I think that's all we have time for today. Obviously, I have so many questions coming. There's a lot of interest here. So if we didn't answer any of your questions and you would like to get in touch with us, please join us on Facebook or LinkedIn or on our website, ndi.tv. And also, please, if you haven't already, subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can find lots more information and helpful videos. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you, Mads, Richard, Robert, Roberto, Masashi and Nori-san, thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you on the next webinar. Have a lovely day.